Today, we're going to make your Spanish sound more natural, more expressive, and honestly, more alive. Because at some point, basic sentences are not enough. You don't just want to say a cafe is good. You want to say it's better, much better, the best, too expensive, so good, less crowded, way more interesting. That's where real conversation starts to feel fun. Our focus today is comparisons, superlatives, and intensifiers in everyday Spanish. In plain English, we're learning how to say more, less, better, worse, the best, the worst, very, to, and so. These are the little power tools that make your Spanish sound fluent instead of flat. Let's start with the core pattern for comparisons. In Spanish, the basic structure is wonderfully simple. Más que for more than, and menos que for less than. So, más caro que means more expensive than. Menos interesante que means less interesting than. Listen to this. Madrid es más grande que mi ciudad. Madrid is bigger than my city. Trabajo menos horas que antes. I work fewer hours than before. Simple, useful, and very common. Here's a memory trick. Think of más as more and menos as less. Spanish is actually being pretty generous here. It's not trying to trick you. How do you say this cafe is more expensive than that one? Este café es más caro que ese. Este café es más caro que ese. Nice. And notice ese, that one. Very natural. You don't need to repeat café again. Now let's make this more conversational. You'll often hear mucho before más or menos to strengthen the comparison. Mucho más means much more, and mucho menos means much less. For example, este barrio es mucho más tranquilo. This neighborhood is much quieter. La clase fue mucho menos aburrida hoy. The class was much less boring today. That one is a nice thing to say to a teacher, by the way. Much less boring. Not exactly a love poem, but we take what we can get. How do you say, my job is much more interesting now, in Spanish? Mi trabajo es mucho más interesante ahora. Mi trabajo es mucho más interesante ahora. Good. Now, there's one very important group you should not build with más or menos in the usual way. Some words have special comparison forms, and these are extremely common. Mejor means better. Peor means worse. Mayor means older or greater. Menor means younger or smaller in a more formal sense, though in everyday conversation for age, people often prefer más joven, so instead of más bueno, say mejor. Instead of más malo, say peor. Native speakers do say these all the time, and using the special forms makes your Spanish sound much more natural. For example, este restaurante es mejor que el otro. This restaurant is better than the other one. Hoy me siento peor que ayer. Today I feel worse than yesterday. How do you say my Spanish is better than before in Spanish? Mi español es mejor que antes. Mi español es mejor que antes. Exactly. Mejor que antes. Better than before. That's a phrase worth keeping. How do you say, this plan is worse than the first one in Spanish? Este plan es peor que el primero. Este plan es peor que el primero. Great. And let's take a tiny detour with primero. In Spanish, primero means first, but before a singular masculine noun, it often shortens to primer, like el primer día, the first day. Here we're not putting it before a noun, so it stays primero, el primero. Little details like that help your Spanish sound polished. Now let's move to the superlative idea. The most, the least, the best, the worst. The main pattern is el más, la más, los más, las más, or el menos and la menos, depending on the noun. For example, es la ciudad más bonita de la zona. It's the prettiest city in the area. Fue el examen menos difícil del curso. It was the least difficult exam in the course. And with the irregular forms, we get el mejor, la mejor, el peor, la peor. For example, fue la mejor experiencia del viaje. It was the best experience of the trip. Ese hotel fue el peor. That hotel was the worst. How do you say that movie was the worst in Spanish? Esa película fue la peor. Esa película fue la peor. Perfecto. La peor because película is feminine. How do you say she is the best student in the class in Spanish? Es la mejor estudiante de la clase. Es la mejor estudiante de la clase. Very nice. And notice we can say estudiante for a woman too. It's one of those nouns that often stays the same form, and the article tells you the gender. Now let's talk about intensifiers, because this is where your speech becomes more human. The three big ones for today are muy, demasiado, and tan. Muy means very. Easy, common, absolutely essential. Estoy muy cansado. I'm very tired. La comida está muy rica. The food is very tasty. How do you say I'm very tired today in Spanish? Estoy muy cansado hoy. Estoy muy cansado hoy. Good. If you're a woman, of course, cansada. Now a useful pronunciation and memory point. Muy is not the same as mucho. Muy goes before adjectives and adverbs. Muy interesante, very interesting. Muy rápido, very fast. Mucho usually goes with nouns or works as a quantity word. Mucho trabajo, a lot of work. So not mucho cansado. Say muy cansado. That's a very common learner mistake. If you remember one quick trick, remember this. Very equals muy, a lot equals mucho. Next, demasiado means too, as in more than is comfortable or good. Demasiado caro, too expensive. Demasiado tarde, too late. Demasiado trabajo, too much work. How do you say, this exercise is too difficult in Spanish? Este ejercicio es demasiado difícil. Este ejercicio es demasiado difícil. Exactly. And yes, difícil keeps that accent mark. Tiny mark, important job. Now tan means so, as in so interesting, so far, so fast. Tan is often paired with como when you compare equals. Tan alto como, as tall as. But even without the full comparison, tan is very common for emphasis. Fue tan raro. It was so strange. Estoy tan feliz. I'm so happy. How do you say the city is so noisy at night in Spanish? La ciudad es tan ruidosa por la noche. La ciudad es tan ruidosa por la noche. Excellent. And here's a quick side note. Por la noche is a very natural way to say at night. You can also hear de noche in some contexts, but por la noche is a safe, useful choice for general speech. Let's build a few everyday comparisons around real-life topics: people, places, work, study, and experiences. People. Mi hermano es más tranquilo que yo. My brother is calmer than I am. Ella habla mucho mejor ahora. She speaks much better now. Notice there's no need to overcomplicate it. Just clear, direct Spanish. Places. Este pueblo es menos turístico. This town is less touristy. La playa estaba mucho más limpia el año pasado. The beach was much cleaner last year. Work. Tengo más reuniones que antes. I have more meetings than before. Mi jefe está mucho menos estresado esta semana. My boss is much less stressed this week. Hopefully. Study. Este tema es más fácil de lo que parece. This topic is easier than it seems. That de lo que pattern is useful when you compare with a whole idea rather than a noun. More difficult than I expected becomes más difícil de lo que esperara. Experiences. El viaje fue mejor de lo esperado. The trip was better than expected. La vuelta fue peor porque había demasiado tráfico. The return trip was worse because there was too much traffic. Let's pause on one more useful structure. As. In Spanish, that's tan como. Tan rápido como. As fast as. Tan interesante como. As interesting as. How do you say this book is as interesting as the movie in Spanish? Este libro es tan interesante como la película. Este libro es tan interesante como la película. Good. So now you've got more than, less than, better, worse, the best, the worst, very, to, and so. That's a huge upgrade. Now I want to give you a short story. Just listen first. El verano pasado visité una ciudad más pequeña que Madrid, pero mucho más tranquila. El hotel no era el más barato, pero sí el mejor de la zona. Cada mañana tomaba un café muy fuerte y un desayuno demasiado grande. Un día encontré una playa tan bonita que volví 3 veces. La comida allí era mejor que en muchos restaurantes famosos. Al final, fue una de las mejores experiencias de mi vida. Now let's go line by line. El verano pasado visité una ciudad más pequeña que Madrid, pero mucho más tranquila. Last summer, I visited a city smaller than Madrid, but much calmer. El hotel no era el más barato, pero sí el mejor de la zona. The hotel wasn't the cheapest, but it was the best in the area. Cada mañana tomaba un café muy fuerte y un desayuno demasiado grande. Every morning, I had a very strong coffee and a breakfast that was too big. Un día encontré una playa tan bonita que volví 3 veces. One day I found a beach so beautiful that I went back 3 times. La comida allí era mejor que en muchos restaurantes famosos. The food there was better than in many famous restaurants. Al final, fue una de las mejores experiencias de mi vida. In the end, it was one of the best experiences of my life. That little story gives you the whole system in context. Más pequeña, mucho más tranquila. El mejor, muy fuerte, demasiado grande, tan bonita, mejor que, una de las mejores. This is exactly how Spanish speakers build rich, natural descriptions. Now let's talk about a few common mistakes so you can avoid them early. First mistake, saying más bueno or más malo, when mejor or peor is the natural choice. If you mean better or worse, go straight to mejor and peor. Second mistake, confusing muy and mucho. Remember, muy interesting, muy cansado, muy rápido, but mucho trabajo, mucha gente, mucho más caro. Third mistake, forgetting agreement in superlatives. La mejor película, not el mejor película. Los mejores días, las peores semanas. Let the article guide you. Fourth mistake, translating too literally from English with so and to. So tired is tan cansado, only when you really mean so tired in an emphatic sense. Very tired is usually muy cansado. Too tired is demasiado cansado. Those 3 are cousins, not twins. Let's hear that contrast clearly. More cansado means very tired. Demasiado cansado means too tired. Tan cansado means so tired. Same family, different personalities. How do you say we have less time than before in Spanish? Tenemos menos tiempo que antes. Tenemos menos tiempo que antes. How do you say, this restaurant is the best in the neighborhood in Spanish? Este restaurante es el mejor del barrio. Este restaurante es el mejor del barrio. How do you say, the office is too noisy in Spanish? La oficina es demasiado ruidosa. La oficina es demasiado ruidosa. How do you say my town is much less crowded in Spanish? Mi pueblo es mucho menos concurrido. Mi pueblo es mucho menos concurrido. Excellent work. Even if some of those felt a little slow, that's fine. Slow today becomes automatic tomorrow. Let's do a quick spoken recap. For more than, use más que. For less than, use menos que. For better and worse, use mejor and peor. For the best and the worst, use el mejor, la mejor, el peor, la peor. For very, use muy. For to, use demasiado. For so, use tan. And for as, use tan como. If you want a memory image, imagine a little ladder. Más climbs up, menos climbs down. Mejor is the upgraded version. Peor is the broken version. Muy turns the volume up. Demasiado turns it up too far. Tan points dramatically and says, wow, so much. And most importantly, use these in real thoughts, not just isolated grammar pieces. Say things like, esta semana fue mejor. This week was better. Estoy muy ocupado. I'm very busy. Ese lugar es demasiado caro. That place is too expensive. La última clase fue mucho más útil. The last class was much more useful. You're not just learning forms. You're learning how to express opinion, preference, surprise, frustration, enthusiasm, and experience. That's what makes a language feel real. So if today felt a bit more advanced, good. That means you're growing. And if some parts already felt familiar, even better. Repetition is not boring. Repetition is how fluency sneaks in. Keep listening for these patterns in real Spanish, and try using just 2 or 3 of them today in your own sentences. That's enough. Small steps, strong habits. Your Spanish is already better than before. In Spanish, mi español es mejor que antes. And after today, it's also much more expressive. Mucho más expresivo.